Moving on to cell standard number 3, you understand the function of the nucleus and the ribosomes. So from this point forward, think of a cell as like a miniature body. So all we're going to study very quickly is all the body parts of a cell. This one we're only going to focus on 2, the nucleus and the ribosomes. So first off, let's start with the nucleus. I think it's the one that's the easiest for people to remember. The nucleus is like the brain of a cell, or the control center. How is it a control center? Because it's not really a brain. So what does it do? Its primary function really is to contain the DNA. The nucleus has a double membrane, and that double membrane is called a nuclear envelope. So it's, again, I said a membrane. An easy way to remember a membrane is like the shell of an M&M. It's continuous with the rough ER, so we're going to talk about ER, or endoplasmic reticulum, later. But just know that the nucleus has a DNA and it has its own membrane. In that membrane, or in that shell, there are these holes. They're called nuclear pores. I think you guys know what pores are. And they control what goes in and out of the nucleus. Chromatin is, think of it like as a jelly. So before DNA and proteins, before we have chromosomes, and we're going to study chromosomes later, before we even get to chromosomes, it's this like jelly goo type thing called chromatin, and eventually it turns into chromosomes. So the inside of a nucleus is this thing called chromatin, which has the DNA and everything, and eventually during the mitosis process, this chromatin sort of solidifies to make a chromosome. And then in the nucleus, there's another nucleus inside the nucleus, and they call that the nucleolus. And this is where they make ribosomes. Okay, so the nucleus, a lot of things going on here. We got the DNA, we got a shell, we've got pores that go in and out, and it has this jellyish type thing called chromatin, where DNA and proteins eventually become chromosomes. And it also has its own little mini nucleus called the nucleolus. If you want a picture, those of you that are visual learners, here's what a nucleus looks like. So this little purple thing is the whole nucleus, as it says here. On the inside, or on the surface, you see these little purple pits. Those are the pores. So they look like sort of like volcanoes almost. So this is the pore itself. On it, you might see little brown dots. Those are the ribosomes. So you see like these brown ribosomes. Here's that rough ER we were talking about, how it's continuous with it. So not only is it a nucleus, this purple thing, not only does it have a membrane, this nuclear envelope, not only does it have 2 membranes, an inner and outer, but it also has even an additional shell, like a jacket, called rough ER. And that purple stuff on the inside, like if you think of this like an apple, that inside is called chromatin. And the seed, or the pit in the middle, is called the nucleolus. And here's a bigger, up-close picture of chromatin. And the second thing you need to know in the standard, besides the nucleus, are ribosomes. You should have heard of ribosomes before, but you may have forgot of it. The whole job of a ribosome, so the nucleus, the whole job was to control the cell. It's like the brain, it has the DNA. The ribosome's goal is to create proteins. Like its whole job is to make proteins. What's your job, ribosome? Make some proteins. It's composed of rRNA. So remember we studied RNA. rRNA is ribosome RNA and protein. It has 2 units, a large subunit and a small subunit. So it's a 2-part organ. There are 2 types of ribosomes. One's called free ribosomes. These are ones that like float in the cytosol. So if you think of it as a glass of water. Think of a cell as like a glass of water. These are things that are like floating and they're not attached to anything. And when they need proteins within the cell, these free ribosomes, they make them. Bound ribosomes, just as it sounds, they're attached to ER. So if you look at these last picture, these brown dots that are on the blue stuff, those are ribosomes that are attached to something, versus ones that are just floating in the middle of the cell doing nothing. Bound ribosomes are attached to ER, and they make proteins primarily to ship them out of the cell. So free ribosomes, we make proteins for the cell. Bound ribosomes, we make proteins to get rid of and export them for somebody else outside of the cell. When I said there's 2 parts of a ribosome, first of all, here's the TEM. Remember the transmission electron microscope? Here's the picture of an ER. And then those little dark circles, those are the ribosomes that are attached to the ER. The ER, if you can't tell, but there are these 2, like they look like rivers. There are brown, black dots that are attached to those rivers. Those are the ribosomes that are attached to ER. Versus these little dark dots that are like not attached to those rivers, those are called the free ribosomes versus the ones that are bound. And then when I said that a ribosome is made of 2 units, here's a picture of what a ribosome looks like. I don't know, it looks like a burger, like a sandwich, we have a large piece and a smaller piece for the ribosome. So again, in this standard, you only need to know two parts, nucleus and ribosomes.